if we are not ready, Malaysia will not be in the position with the right demographic structure.
Could Malaysia, be the regional leader?
Because they did that, they went bankrupt.
Hello everyone and welcome to yet another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. My name is Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hazwin Hassan. Today, as usual, we bring you the latest on policies, people, and possibilities in Malaysia. Starting with Perkeso's bold new moves, 24/7 coverage for workers and retirement safety net plans for our golden years. Sounds like a game changer.
Right. Absolutely, Hazwin. Now, did you know also that nearly 9 million Malaysian workers will soon be benefiting from the round-the-clock protection by Perkeso? Now, what does this mean? Does it mean that when you're binge-watching a series back at home and you accidentally trip, Perkeso's got your back? I mean, Perkeso plans to expand their employment injury scheme to also cover all accidents outside of working hours, work-related or not. But right now, their hands are a little bit tied because the law only allows them to cover incidents during work hours.
Yes, that's right, Amalina. And earlier in the week, it was reported that 95% of Malaysian companies are actually MSMEs, or micro, small, medium enterprises, that cannot afford separate insurance benefits. Now, this could be a lifeline for these workers. Imagine having 90% of your last drawn salary as income replacement if you lose a leg, whether it's at work or elsewhere.
Right. It does sound like a mini miracle, but I wonder if there is a catch to it. I suppose in the form of, salary adjustments or additional contributions here. Now, how do we think workers will feel about that? We're going to go into that in a little bit because on one hand, it does sound comforting, the security aspect, but on the other, nobody loves more than deductions from their paycheck.
Yes, Amalina. And on top of that, Perkeso has also been asked to come up with helping to introduce what they call practical solutions for Malaysia's aging population, called aged care protection and aged living centres.
Yes, indeed, Hazwin. And Perkeso is actually calling it the golden tsunami. Now, that's 20% of Malaysians over 65 by 2055. Now, what's certain is that without preparation, old age poverty could become a huge issue.
And Amalina, from the looks of it, these initiatives show foresight. But the big question is, will the stakeholders, i.e. the government, workers and employers, all get on board? Now, to help further discuss this, we have in the studio with us today Perkeso Deputy CEO of Strategy and Corporate, Edmund Chong. Edmund, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hazwin. Thank you, Amalina.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Now, let's start off with the basics here. How will, first, Perkeso manage the increased risk exposure from the round-the-clock coverage while ensuring that contributions remain affordable for both employers and employees?
Well, when Perkeso designs any products, it's not just plucking numbers from the air, but it's actually an actuarial evaluation. I mean, you have to understand the behaviors, the trends, understanding the risks that we will be taking, and also, of course, at the same time, it's not only making that the fund or the whole scheme to be sustainable, but adequacy is also important. I mean, when it comes to giving out social protection benefits, it's not just about giving a lump sum figure, but it's to ensure that whatever is given would be able to get a person to continue with their lives. Or I always say that, people have dreams, but then when accident happens, dreams gets distorted or disrupted. But it's important that we ensure that the dreams continue for the children, for the family, and so on.
Yeah. For this 24/7 coverage, right, will there be a tiered sort of contribution be introduced, for instance, that's based on risk profiling, and also in terms of, how private insurance models present so?
Nope. Basically, when you talk about social insurance is very much different from private insurance. I mean, they are risk-based, of course they are risk-based, but social insurance is all about social solidarity. I mean, it's about the bigger cohort supporting the unfortunate, least fortunate people. For example, the working would compensate the non-working people. The healthy people compensates the injured or the sick. So it's very much the same like how we have developed our products. So basically, it will be a certain percentage, not more than what is currently being paid by the employers,
Right.
to be used as a calculation as part of your salary. So the higher you earn, of course, the percentage of it would say that the higher the amount would be.
Right.
But also at the same time, it would also be used as the basis of your benefits. For example, I mean, Amalina made it very clear, it's always about the replacement of income. Social protection is about replacement of income, and we would like to be as much be able to replace those income. For example, if you're earning 5,000 ringgit, we should be getting about 4,000 ringgit or so in terms of benefits here.
But generally, I think that making protection more inclusive and more comprehensive like this would probably, number one, scare employers, for the obvious. How do you think Perkeso and perhaps government can introduce more incentives to, number one, assure employers that it's not going to burden them? Because it does, from the get-go, it does seem like employers now have to put out more.
Well, I think I would have to make it very clear about this misconception where currently we have the employment injury scheme. Yeah, the employment injury scheme is purely contributed purely by the employers. But when it comes to this 24-hour protection, it is about something that happens outside the working hours. So it will be a contribution from the workers for this purpose.
Okay.
Right. But in this sense, right, for this 24/7 protection that Perkeso is going to introduce, could employers or employee opt out of it?
Well, to make a social insurance fund work, you would need a collective or a bigger pool that everyone has to be part of it. I mean, you could design a product, but if someone opts out of it and it becomes a smaller pool, then I would say that the pricing would be much more expensive. Yeah.
Okay.
So at the same time, when Perkeso designed a social insurance scheme, we have to make sure that it's always affordable. And to make it affordable, everyone has to be part of the scheme.
Okay. Well, we have to address the elephant in the room here, right? The impact on, basically the insurance industry. Do you think that Perkeso is, giving other insurance providers a run for their money by offering the outside of work sort of protection? And how are you going to pull that sort of audience, or at least clientele?
If I could recall some numbers from an article that I've read, about 49% of Malaysians are actually covered by private insurance. So that's 49%. And I would also say that 49% are the groups coming from the groups who is able to afford private insurance. Yeah.
Okay.
But when it comes to social insurance, we have to make sure that those who could not afford private insurance be able to be protected as well.
Right.
So I'm not saying that we will be in competition with the private insurance, but I think it's important that social insurance and private insurance collaborate so that we would be able to give out extra protection to the whole population.
Right. So has there been any engagement though between Perkeso and all these private providers?
We haven't actually had formal chats yet.
Right.
We haven't had formal chats yet. But I think it is important that we would have to coordinate this at a very high level. I mean, it would be good if we could discuss this with the central banks, because I think the central bank is the one governing all these private insurance, and it's important that we ensure that we would have enough protection layering. For example, when we talk about social protection, the first layer is always, welfare or social assistance,
Right.
and where every Malaysian is entitled for some assistance if anything were to happen to them. But of course, there's another layer which is called social insurance, which is Perkeso, where it's a mandatory scheme where it gives another layer of protection for an extra, for example, replacement of income and so on. And if for those who are earning who could afford even more, they should be protecting themselves with private insurance. For example, when it comes to Perkeso, most of our contributions are based on a ceiling, and right now the ceiling is about 6,000 ringgit, meaning that if you earn more than 6,000 ringgit, you will still be compensated based on that 6,000 ringgit. So if a person doesn't want to have any lifestyle modification or lifestyle changes
Right.
post accidents or post
Right.
injury, you may want to get yourself protected above the 6,000 ringgit ceiling. I
Right.
mean, that's important, so that you would be able to continue with whatever it is, like for example your children's education and so on.
Sorry, I just want to highlight this because part of this whole insurance business or industry, right? I suppose, distress or discomfort comes in the claim processes. How does Perkeso aim to, I suppose, smoothen these sort of processes, as opposed to, we've heard like all these scary stories whereby I've paid a high premium, but whenever there's an accident and then I've called my insurance agents and suddenly I'm not covered for that. And or the claims takes like at least 1 to 2 days, where if let's say there's an emergency situation, a life might be lost in that sense, right?
Yeah, basically, when it comes to claim processing, I'm proud to say that we have placed most of our presence in most of the emergency departments in almost most government hospitals in Malaysia. And in any case of an accident, we are actually giving out guarantee letters to ensure that we are covering these people in within 24 hours. So we are quite fast
Right.
in terms of claims processing when it comes to emergency. But Amalina, you struck the crux of the problem in the current scheme, the employment injury scheme. When it comes to the employment injury scheme, what we realize is that with the current with COVID-19 happening in 2020, the world of work has actually changed. There are flexible working arrangements. There is a very grey line between working from home and working at work. And when an accident happens, it becomes a problem for Perkeso because it's very hard to determine the causation of the particular accident. For
Right.
example, if you're at home working, and so happen that you need to go somewhere to the kitchen to grab a bite or something, and you trip and fall. So is that a work injury or not? So it's very hard for us to determine because the home and the work is a total different environment.
That's right.
Yeah, and we believe that with this 24 hours coverage, with this new product, we would just process those claim like without asking. There's a nature of a no fault kind of concept placed in the whole
Right.
system.
And this is essentially what the more comprehensive coverage plans to address, is because, I mean, essentially, like you said, there'll be no distinction between whether it happens at home or on the way to work or at work, because as it is now, with the laws in place now, let's say you were about to leave your house for work and you trip as you're opening your car door, for instance. That's a grey area, isn't it?
Yeah, a very grey area, and
Yeah.
it's becoming very difficult for the investigation officers because they would have to determine whether you are in the car or outside the car,
Right.
or you have
Yeah.
crossed your door or you're still within this door. So we always joke in Perkeso that, if you want it to be a work-related accident, when you're about to fall, you better fall outside the gate, yeah?
Oh, God forbid. Okay.
Right. I mean, before we go into the next topic of discussion, I just want to maybe, if Perkeso can, just list out the definitive sort of like, I suppose, advantage of this 24/7 Perkeso coverage, right? That previously Perkeso is not able to offer.
The advantages, I would say, if you were to look through in statistics in 2022, 2023, circa 22, 23, the country reported, I would think the police reported there were a couple of thousands of fatalities, road fatalities, on the road. Couple of thousands, but in Perkeso, there were only 622 deaths recorded because of employment injury. So imagine that over 1,000 of people out there actually were not covered by Perkeso because of these fatalities. And around that time as well, there were also about 80,000 claims, 80,000 claims coming to Perkeso, but slightly above 60,000 were certified as employment injury, meaning that about 15,000 of them were actually not covered by Perkeso. So the question or the question that we ask ourselves in Perkeso is that what happens to them? You know, they are not compensated. They too have a family. The same problem that those who have suffered from an accident.
Yeah.
What happens to them? So we believe with this scheme, it's gonna have a wider coverage. You know, covering almost every working population in who's in the formal sector, as well as providing them protection outside the typical working hours.
Right.
So when a claim happens, it would be definitely much faster because Perkeso does not determine whether it's claimable or not because it's coverage beyond working hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And I suppose the bigger picture to all of this is that, I mean, you know, if you're covering after working hours and you do get insured for that and you do get the necessary treatment for that, that means that that person is going to, you know, go through the treatment and heal faster, and probably it won't impact the employers that much, right?
Yeah, you're definitely correct. I mean, the most important thing is that we always believe that it's always productivity in the economy. Yeah, the workers are always assets. Yeah, the workers are the important assets, and it says very clearly in the name of our ministry itself. It's the Ministry of Human Resources. Every human or every Malaysian is a resource to the country, and they're valuable. And like what you pointed out, Perkeso now practices a lot on its new mantra, which is prevention before rehabilitation, rehabilitation before compensation. If best possible, we would want to prevent accidents, and we do a lot of work in prevention. But at the same time, when accidents do happen, we do a lot of rehabilitation because we want to reduce the disability duration, the days of work, medical leaves and so on, so that the person could be productive again.
Right.
Yeah. So that's important for the employers, and for the employers, I think they're always in a dilemma whether a person when they get into an accident, or you get into a dilemma whether should I replace this worker, But if you replace this worker and if this worker comes back, it becomes another problem because you'll have two persons doing the particular job.
Yep.
So we believe with our new scheme and rehabilitation playing a vital role in assisting these workers back to work, we could assure that the employers that whatever it is, when an accident happens, we are able to actually put this worker back in the proper rehabilitation program and also place them back to work.
Okay. Now, I want to move on to financial sustainability. With the expansion of retirement benefits and the 24-hour protection plan, how does Perkeso plan to ensure the long-term sustainability of its funds?
Well, when it comes to funding, I mean, we are talking about the aged care now, right? Yeah. You see, I think the funding is of course important. We are currently contributing to our old age savings as well. But when it comes to aged care, I think it is very important to understand that Malaysians, we are hyper aging. We are hyper aging. We are aging faster than our ASEAN neighbors. Yeah, by like what you guys put out earlier on, and you guys said that by 2050, we would be a super age nation where 20% of our population would be above 60. And when the time comes, and if we do not have enough savings, we do not have enough money in our banks to survive to post-retirement,
Right.
I think we will just fall into poverty. And the thing is that Malaysians are living longer and longer now. And fertility rates in Malaysia is also not helping.
Right. But what measures are in place to, I suppose, avoid financial strain, at least on Perkeso's end?
Yeah, so that's why in Perkeso we are saying that, that the golden tsunami is coming. Yeah, I mean, the golden tsunami is coming. And Perkeso believe that there is a need for a social insurance platform where we could actually come up with a pension program. Yeah, a pension program through a solidarity fund where everyone contributes and is able to be pensionable upon retirement. Yeah, and when you talk about social insurance funds, like what I said earlier again, the healthy supporting the sick, but in this case, it's the productive group supporting the age group. Yeah, so that's how the fund the fund is being designed so that we could have enough contributions to be able to fund the elderly group in the future.
But do you think Malaysians, as of this moment, can buy into this idea, with the whole bigger move, especially with the government having to, refrain from, or at least revising or reforming the pension concept?
Well, it's not the matter of if, but it's a matter of when. When it happens, I mean, there's no turning back. And when it happens, Malaysia, if we are not ready, Malaysia will not be in the position with the right demographic structure to support this whole scheme. So the time is ticking actually for Malaysia, but we have to get the ball rolling. We have to start the conversations like these kind of conversations that, if we are not prepared for it, we are then heading towards disaster, towards old age poverty.
For your aged care protection scheme in specific, maybe you can explain to us the contribution model. For instance, are you going to introduce a flat rate model, or is it going to be income based?
Well, Perkeso again is very based on social insurance. Social insurance is always about solidarity. Yeah, it's not a flat rate. It's also again going to be based on your income. That means there'll be an X percentage of contributions coming from income, where when the time comes, or where upon retirement, you would be receiving about hopefully 40 to 50% of your average wage that you have actually earned. So hopefully that if you're earning about 4 to 5,000 by the time comes, then you would be able to get about 3,000 ringgit a month. So we are finding that sweet spot, that contribution amount, that sweet spot to make it affordable for Malaysians.
Okay.
But at the same time, we are also thinking about portability. Malaysia, we have people in the formal as well as the informal sector, the self-employed, and everyone's talking about the platform workers as well. And we are also seeing the younger generations shifting to be in these informal sectors. I mean, we are seeing new forms of works, like new form of employment, like we have people who are what you call who works through social media, who does a lot of influencing jobs. And these people, they are not in formal employment.
Right.
So the question of portability is also important when designing this scheme.
Right.
Meaning that if you are in the formal sector, you get the employees and your contribution to come into the system to fund your future pensions. But at the same time, we have to make it portable and affordable for this group as well. And when you talk about the informal groups, it's not about, we always hear that the Insta famous people or the influencers earning 5 figures and so on. But bear in mind, the informal sector is also the people who are fishermen, farmers, and so on. And when we talk about fishermen and farmers, they do not earn a steady income, a monthly income. They're quite seasonal. So we need to make that the schemes quite flexible so that everyone is actually protected by this pension scheme.
Has there been any concerns at all about extending this, especially for aged care, for the elderly care, right? Because I can only think of what happened in Greece, when they raised the age of the pension age. Then the government, although it's that is a welfare model government, it's an entirely different sort of support system there. The safety net that they have there is more comprehensive by the government, but because they did that, they went bankrupt. Has there been that sort of concern here, because we want to be more inclusive, we want to be more paternalistic in terms of the welfare we give out to other people?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Greece model, it's very much like what you say. It's a welfare model. It's tax funded. It's tax funded. But when it comes to social insurance, it's self funding. It's very much funded by employers, workers, and their bosses as well. So the framework, it's about combining the whole social insurance system together with the labor market. The idea is to also ensure, Perkeso, as you know, we are also doing the employment insurance. We have the My Future Jobs portals where we have a lot of labor market interventions, creating jobs, helping matching right people to the right jobs and so on. So it's important to get Malaysians who are outside, currently people who are outside the systems, they need to be part of the whole labor market ecosystem. So in that way, we are able to make sure that our group remain healthy, the numbers remain enough, and of course, not forgetting not only labor market, but we should be speaking about fertility as well. Malaysians are not producing enough new Malaysians to actually support the whole demographics.
But if we are, like you said, we are an aging population, and we are at a faster rate than most of our neighbours here in the region, then we're not going to have enough people to support the aging population.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of a vicious cycle. Yeah,
It is, isn't it?
I mean,
Yeah.
for example, in Perkeso, we are seeing numbers that their fertility their growth in population or newborns based on the number of public holidays we have in a year.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the more public holidays we have, we actually see a spur in newborns. But we were sort of expecting that during the lockdowns,
Okay.
but it didn't happen. Yeah,
Right.
it didn't happen because of uncertainty. And I think
Economic uncertainty, you mean?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, economic uncertainty because there are thoughts that how would I fund my children's education? Yeah, I mean these thoughts itself are haunting new couples in having more children because you're not able to have that. But if we could remove all these uncertainties, for example, old age protection, I might have enough. I wouldn't depend on any other methods. Then I think we would be able. I mean, it's not Rome wasn't built in a single day,
Yep.
but I think we need to address one problem at a time.
Right,
Okay.
right. I mean, coming back to, we are still talking about retirement and sustainability here, but what is Perkeso doing on their part to educate the public at large to, look into social protection as a very important issue? Because, again, when it comes to, your savings, just in general, right, financial literacy and of that sort, Malaysians generally don't look at social welfare or social protection as an important issue. For instance, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of schemes being presented. I don't have to name what schemes they are,
Right, yeah.
but they take out money from their KWSP, any sort of asset that they have to help support them. But sometimes it's not necessarily for the important, spendings.
Well, again, this is very much got to do with behavior insights. Yeah. What we also know is that when someone gets a lump sum amount of money, they spend the money differently. But if it's being paid on a periodical basis, the spending behavior should change. Yeah. Give someone 500 ringgit in one go, he would most probably buy a new mobile phone. But if you were to separate that 50 ringgit in the next 10 months, the person would actually buy essentials like rice, oil, and so on. So it's important that we understand these behavioral insights and try to mold them into policy makings. Yeah. Perhaps in those days it was difficult, but today, with advancement of technology, we are able to do that. The way we disburse money and so on. In those days, it would be very administratively expensive to do that. But back to your question, what is Perkeso doing? We are trying to conceptualize something with our Prihatin application. We are trying to come up with something new with our Prihatin app. We have a Prihatin app. The Prihatin app shows you your contributions, the amount of contributions, but we want to translate those numbers in just that rather than it shows you what are your contributions, but it should also tell you what is your protection based on these numbers.
Right.
Am I eligible for rehabilitation? How much would I be compensated if something happens to me, and so on? So if we could translate, it's very still in an experimental stage. If we could translate these numbers and saying that, after an accident, I'll be getting about 2,000 ringgit for X number of time, or if I get into a permanent disability, I would get a pension amounting to this. I would then understand that I might need to have extra coverage. Yeah, like for example, Perkeso covers up to 6,000 ringgit.
Okay.
So if I don't want any lifestyle changes, I would need to be covered. I need to buy another product so that I'll be compensated about the same with my previous pre-injury.
Right. But isn't
income.
that the same as sort of setting with the existing insurance provider? They tell you upfront what you are entitled for.
Yeah,
So how would this be different, though?
They tell upfront to the higher income group. Yeah, so
To those who
because
can
the
afford it,
private
yes, okay.
insurance, I would say that I might say that, I'm saying that the private insurance they might be stereotyping them that their clients are from the high income. But I think it's important to tell the rest of the Malaysians from the low income of the same story as well. And this is I think it's where we are lacking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Still on, I mean, I suppose you're looking at bringing that visibility across to, I suppose, those who are not able to access this sort of services. But on transparency aspect, right, especially when it comes to the schemes that you are going to introduce, what sort of mechanism is Perkeso going to implement, especially when it comes to the auditing of these funds, basically?
Well, it is, when it comes to our law, I mean, when we talk about the Employees Social Security Act, I think it's important that in our law, it's statutory that for Perkeso to do an actual evaluation once every 5 years, at least once every 5 years. So the funds are always being audited, the funds are always being seen with the number of accidents and so on. And this would actually tell Perkeso on how we are managing the fund. Yeah, how the fund is doing, how healthy is the fund. And there could be also recommendations that hey, Perkeso, you may want to look into prevention so that you could reduce the number of accidents, or there are certain sectors which are facing more accidents, and you may want to increase more prevention activities in such areas. Yeah, so I think when it comes to the numbers, I think it's very much well taken care of. Yeah.
Okay. Now, on gig workers and future coverage expansion, how does Perkeso intend to integrate gig workers into both the 24-hour protection and retirement safety net? Will participation be mandatory or voluntary under the proposed gig workers bill?
Yeah, when the gig workers bill is totally something different. The gig workers is going to be something that to recognize the gig workers as workers.
Yep.
Yeah. At one time, we were thinking that the gig economy or the informal sector is a transition type of job, but I believe they are here to stay. Yeah, so I think that's important that in this new law, which is being drafted right now, it's more about highlighting the importance of this worker and how we would want to regulate them, because there's a big disparity between the formal sector and also the gig workers. I mean, the gig sector, for the formal sector, you could unionize, have a unionized body for them, but when it comes to gig, there's no platform for them to go.
Yep.
When we talk about minimum wage, the gig workers do not have any platform. When it comes to social security, the formal sector, they have employers who is mandated to actually contribute for them, but in the gig workers, they are sort of in a limbo.
They are.
So that's the reason why the law has to come into place. But when it comes to protection for these workers, the current gig workers are currently covered by the Act 789, which is the Social Security Act for the self-employed, and that law only covers employment injury. Yeah, employment injury. But again, when it was introduced late in somewhere in 2017. We were actually discovering about this kind of behaviors. I mean, it's totally different from the behaviors of the people in the informal sectors, in the formal sector. Sorry. So the informal sectors, like what I say, they don't earn a fixed monthly income. Yep. Income is by day. For example, e-hailing or a p-hailing driver. If it's raining like this, you would not have an income, because you would not be able to send more food and so on.
Yeah. Right.
So we are learning this behavior, and we are actually incorporating new features to make this act more flexible, so that they would be able to be part of the system. And talking about protection, yes, we would want to protect them outside the working hours as well. We would want to have other protection mechanisms for them. For example, the formal sectors have the unemployment insurance, where if you lose your job, you are given a allowance for 6 months. We would want to introduce something for them. And when it comes to the pension schemes, we would want them to also be part of that particular system. But again, we need to understand that whole behavior, or that spending behavior, or the income behavior for these people,
right,
so that we could make it affordable for them.
Okay, yes, with that, right, how do you plan to make it affordable for gig workers who don't necessarily have that sort of stable income, right?
Okay, the good thing about gig workers is that they have platforms, and platforms, call them what you like. They have actually done very well in technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, for example, if you are able to contribute, I mean, if you're able to get jobs online or win on a digital platform, you would also be able to make contributions, minor contributions. For example, for every drive or every ride that you make, for example, if you were to you make a ride, for example, and you make about 4 ringgit, if we could deduct a nominal amount, say for example 1%, yeah, so 4 ringgit would amount to about I would say 4 cents, yeah. So for every day, if we are able to contribute a little bit, we would be able to accumulate it into contributions. So we need to understand this behavior to be able to fund this whole social insurance scheme. Yeah. So that's the mechanism that we would like to see for the platform workers.
Right. So we've talked about how we can, encourage gig workers to look at social protection. But now I want to go and discuss on the global comparisons here, and at least Perkeso's long-term vision, especially when it comes to benchmarking against international model. You just mentioned that you just got back from ASEAN's social protection conference. Maybe you can share a little bit about your time there, or what Perkeso has learned. And for instance, we do have, other international models such as New Zealand having to be the benchmark for social protection. Where are we at, and how can we be at that level?
I think it's not about one particular country. I mean, you spoke about New Zealand. New Zealand is an example for the 24 hours coverage. Yeah, but there are other models out there. I mean, it's not about copying a specific models, but to understand certain concepts and to also understand the mistakes that they've made. Yeah, there's no point implementing a policy and also copying the mistakes as well.
Yep.
But when it comes to social protection, in terms of Perkeso's vision, it is important, every time when we talk about social protection is that, people always say that, I don't know my rights. I think Perkeso needs to talk more about it. But I think the future for Perkeso is that you may not need to know about your rights under social security. All you need to know is that when something happens to you, social security kicks in. For example, one of the initiatives is that we are working with the police so that we are able to get death records as fast as to Perkeso, so that we could disburse benefits as fast as possible. So when it comes to social security, it is important that you may not need to know. It's not about claims anymore. It's about when something happens, something bad happens to you. That's where an early intervention point or the early touch points that Perkeso has to be there to be able to come and assist you. So for example, we have placed, I've told earlier that we have placed our systems in most of the emergency departments in most government hospitals. All the doctors know is that when an accident happens, someone is being brought into the emergency department, the first thing is to find out your IC number.
Right.
And if it's protected, you just have to inform Perkeso. And Perkeso would then give the assurance that you're being covered on, and all costs of the implants would be paid by Perkeso. I think that's very important. And at the same time, when it comes to death, it's not about waiting for a claim, because a person may not know about their rights. But the moment when Perkeso knows there's a death, I mean, that's the time where we would have to come and disburse our assistance. Yeah.
Without having to be called.
No, there's no more claim anymore. I
Exactly.
mean, we have already started that. We have this so-called squad prihatin, and these are the guys who actually scroll social media, newspapers to see if there's talk of deaths, accidents, and so on. And these are the people who locate these people.
Right. And we've seen, I suppose, these people actually in action as well. I mean, in recent days, right? We've seen Perkeso putting their foot on the ground and actually tackling those situations. But are there other best practices that Perkeso is pushing for Malaysia to adopt?
There are many best practices. I mean, when it comes to the 24 hours coverage, of course, it's New Zealand. When it comes to other forms of insurance, the Koreans are doing quite well. In fact, our ASEAN neighbors like Thailand, they are also quite progressive. So we have to learn a lot of ways on their innovative ways or simple ways of doing things. Indonesia, how did they cover a bigger population than Malaysia? And they are, I always give an example from the mountains of Philippines to the villages in Indonesia. They are able to be protecting all these group of people. So the whole idea totally changes when you understand that it could be done with just mobile numbers. There are some countries like in the Africas, contributions are difficult. So for every contribution that is being taken, it's always being taken based on their prepaid numbers. Yeah. So there are a lot of innovative practices, and fortunately, we are also part of the International Social Security Association. I mean, it has a vast database of 150 over countries with over 300 member organizations where we could leverage on best practices. Yeah. So these are the things that we are always looking at, scanning the surroundings and trying to implement these new policies or introducing these new policies.
So it's accessibility, administrative processes, and I suppose the success rate of attending to a particular, case then, right? Okay. Could Malaysia, be the regional leader in having to provide 24/7 protection, at least fronted by Perkeso?
I think we would be one of the first in the region. And I think it's something to be very proud of, because when in Perkeso, we are always thinking about which groups should we be protecting. I mean, we've moved from the formal sector to the informal sector. We also have the Housewife Act, and also we're trying to see who else who's going to be covered. We always say that Perkeso should be covering from everyone from the womb to the tomb or cradle to the grave. Yeah.
Ideally.
But but at the same time, that's only one dimension. There's also another dimension to it, which is the risk. We have to cover or protect someone from the perspective of the life recycle. Yeah, it's a life cycle thing that when as a child you have different problems, different risks. When you're working, you have different risks, and at old age you have different risks. So all these risks has to be covered as well. For example, for the formal sector, the workplace risks. When we encourage everyone to go to work, we have to ensure that the workplace is safe.
The occupational safety hazard, you mean?
So at the same time, you have to. If something happens, then that's where social protection has to come in. But again, with the changing of these new flexible working arrangements, the life risk or the work risk has changed, because the risk no longer exists at the workplace, but the risk now exists at home as well. So that's where we are actually creating more products to cover people, to cover these risks.
And as part of risk assessment management here, do you think this makes it more difficult, more challenging to future-proof your initiatives against on a bigger scale, the unforeseen, the unexpected
economic downturns? Let's say there's going to be
events like
another
that,
pandemic,
or even a
like
potential pandemic.
Yes, the question is not if this happens again, but when this happens again, we have to be ready.
Right.
I mean, we are thinking of all possible scenarios. I mean, we have foreseen a lot of things and learned a lot of things from the last pandemic. We're also seeing new changes, evolution of work. And 20 years ago, nobody thought that we would have platforms where another stranger would pick up another stranger in their car to go from one place to one place. And the world of work is always changing. I mean, we've seen video platforms replacing the video stalls back then, and things are moving beyond our imagination.
Right.
With technology in place, we have to be ready, but at the same time, we also need to be able to adapt to new situations. Yeah. And that's what we are actually doing, because we saw the shift from the formal way of work at the office now moving over to home, and we need to prepare Malaysians for that. So at the same time, we are also seeing trends of people moving from the formal sector to the informal sector. New jobs like being influencers and so on. These are the things that we have to be ready for.
Right. That's how you guys are looking ahead and taking at least 2-3 steps.
Yeah, it's not that I have a crystal ball, but I hope that I would have a crystal ball to foresee all this.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Edmund. So there you go, Edmund Cheong, Deputy CEO for Corporate and Strategy for Perkeso. Now we have a quick 10 minutes to just give you guys a wrap up of what transpired within the week, and then we'll go back to you.
Sure, Amelina. Yeah, just to update everyone. Sadly, today, on the day that this show is recorded, Thursday, November 28th, Malaysian billionaire Ananda Krishnan died at the age of 86. Ananda's private investment vehicle, Usaha Tegasan Berhad, made the announcement confirming his death. Ananda, a towering figure in Malaysia's business landscape, despite resolutely staying in the background, made significant contributions to nation building and the corporate world, and his philanthropic initiatives have touched and changed the lives of many.
Ananda Krishnan, often known as AK, was one of Malaysia's richest figures with a net worth of once surpassing $5 billion US. Now, known for his discreet profile, he built a diversified empire through Usaha Tegas, spanning telecommunications, media, as well as energy. Now, born in 1938 in Brickfields, Kuala Lumpur, Ananda studied political science at the University of Melbourne and earned an MBA from Harvard. Now, his business journey began in oil trading, later expanded into tech and media. He is best known for his founding initiative for Maxis, Malaysia's top telecom provider, as well as Astro, the nation's first satellite TV service.
Yes, and he also launched Miasat, pioneering Malaysia's satellite industry. Despite his business acumen, Ananda remained deeply committed to philanthropy. Through the Yayasan Ananda Krishnan Foundation, he contributed significantly to education, arts, sports, and humanitarian initiatives. His charitable activities have provided scholarships and support to countless individuals, reflecting his dedication to uplifting society. While he experienced great success, not all ventures flourished. His investment in India's telecom market, particularly through Aircel, faced setbacks. Ananda's only son, Ajahn Siripanyo, made the extraordinary decision at 18 to relinquish a multi-billion-dollar fortune to pursue life as a Buddhist monk in Thailand.
Right. And earlier in this week, the NST reported that medical insurance premiums are expected to rise between 40 and 70% next year. Now, following notices sent by insurance providers to policyholders citing the rising cost of medical care in private hospitals as the primary reason. I know Edmund has some thoughts on this. We're going to get to you in a bit. But a report by a Malay daily says that many users have opted to cancel their medical insurance policies as they can no longer afford the increasing premiums.
Yes, that's right. And on Wednesday, Bayan Baru MP Simza Zin told Parliament that Bank Negara should look into the premium hikes. He said that the central bank should not simply dismiss the higher premiums as a business decision. Bank Negara should not say this is a free market or a willing seller willing buy a thing. This is not right, he said. If the Domestic Trade and Cost of Living Ministry can investigate over a 10-cent price hike in eggs, why can't Bank Negara look into this matter as well? Which saw premium increases by hundreds of ringgit, he told a press conference after the parliament sitting. Now, the NSC's Business Times then reported that BNM actually has an answer to all of this. As of September, BNM made it a requirement for all insurers and takaful operators to introduce a co-payment option for medical insurance and takaful products to help reduce high premiums. The co-payment option requires policyholders to share medical costs with insurers. BNM said in a statement in July that it can help lower premiums by up to 68%, depending on the co-payment rate. An example would be that for a 20% co-payment policy, a policyholder would then pay 20% of the medical bill, such as 4,000 ringgit for a 20,000 ringgit bill, while the insurer covers the rest.
And in other healthcare-related developments, the Health Ministry says it will review proposals from 5 nurses' associations as part of feedback of the recent increase in weekly work hours. That is, this comes after criticisms towards a new directive under the Public Service Remuneration Scheme, or at least system, SSPA, which now mandates 45 hours compared to previous 42 hours. Now, Health Minister Datuk Sri Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad says he acknowledges the input and concerns of various stakeholders about the changes under the new SSPA system.
But a health and social policy group says that the proposed schedule for nurses, resulting in longer hours and insufficient rest, may put them at risk for fatigue and compromise the quality of patient care. Galen Centre for Health and Social Policy CEO Azrul Muhammad Khalib says they stand firm in support of the Malayan Nurses Union's concerns about the 45-hour work week for nurses. He said that nursing a critical workforce already overburdened by shortages and demanding shift schedules must not be subjected to additional demands without adequate support and consideration of their unique challenges. Now, the country's healthcare system, he said, is facing an urgent workforce crisis with nearly 7,000 vacancies for nurses remaining unfilled in 2023 and an ongoing trend of mass resignations from the public health service.
Right. And before we end this, just want to turn the attention back to Edmund. Particularly on, we've been talking about social protection for the last 40 minutes or so. How do you see these developments affect the larger push to have greater social protection, especially among the nation?
Well, I think it's something that Malaysians needs to start talking about. Yeah, we should be talking about how or what or even taboo things is like what happens after someone dies or someone dies in abruptly. Yeah, so these things needs to be discussed and these things need to be put on the table. We have to be transparent about it.
Yeah.
And then design something that what we need.
Yeah. I mean, the thought of, people dropping out from their medical insurance just because the premiums are getting higher, Perkeso's point of view.
Well, if when you talk about social insurance, I think, in when it comes to employment injuries and so on, we have the typical welfare layer, which is paid by taxes. We have the Perkeso layer, which is social insurance, and you have the private insurance. But if we talk about health, I think the missing middle would be the social insurance part. You have the universal healthcare model, but you have the private model, but you're lacking the middle part.
Right.
Yeah, you do not have that social insurance model in that whole ecosystem. But again, when we talk about social health insurance, it's something that you have. It's something very complex where you need to have proper controls in place, proper policy making in place so that you do not create policies which would create medical inflation. I've seen models. I've seen models in Germany where they're using this DRG or case mix system where hospitals are benefiting or given a price for a disease, and they are profiting based on the efficiency of a case. For example, in Germany, a doctor doesn't go trigger happy when someone has a fracture on the shoulder. You do not do a CAT scan or CT scan, but an X-ray, it's enough because doing a CAT scan is much more expensive. So these controls are in place, which actually put in certain cost control when it comes to medical inflation.
If I may, though, I feel like when you're talking about this sort of middle option, right, in terms of making coverage more inclusive and comprehensive, I think that somehow at some point in the future it might evolve into what the US has, like Medicare or Obamacare, which eventually people were disappointed with. It didn't turn out to what it was promised to be, did it?
It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's also continuity. It's also about having ideas but being able to implement all ideas. Yeah. So I think it's important that if Malaysia were to look into this, but we should be designing something that is sustainable for everyone and affordable for everyone. But the sad truth is that when people drop out from this insurance policy, I think it's very regressive. I mean, we have a system where everyone's part of it, but not everyone, but most people who are part of it. But falling out of the system, it's something bad for the country. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, anyway, thank you so much again, Edmund. I suppose, Hazwin, what's certain is that when we talk about social security or protection, the important aspect here, it's not just about the assets, right? You have to talk about the sustainability aspect. You got to talk about the inclusivity aspect as well as the whether
Adequacy.
yes, and whether or not the systems are adaptive to progress over time. I think obviously this discussion will expand in the next few days or next few weeks, as we see maybe Perkeso will probably introduce new schemes or new protection sort of programs moving forward. But what's certain is that for our audience who actually enjoyed this particular episode, what you can do is you can drop a comment, you can like, as well as subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to know at least more, I suppose, when it comes to what Perkeso has to offer, definitely engage with us, and we'll reach out to Perkeso ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can forward your questions if you put them in the comments. You can always forward it to Edmund.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Again, thank you so much, Edmund, Deputy CEO for Corporate and Strategy in Perkeso itself. Right. And for our audience, if you like this episode, yes, again, like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. Follow us on socials, X, Instagram, Facebook, as well as Threads. My name is Amalina Kamal,
And I'm Hazwin Hassan.
and we'll see you next week.